Hello everyone! Today is going to be a special episode as we're going to share a compilation of some very interesting, scary, mysterious, and terrifying videos. But before that, to get to know each other better, I'd like to know which city this content was posted in and what time it happened. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and let's dive into the story. The abandoned town at mile marker 47. The 28th of October, 2003, 2:37 p.m. The empty road stretched endlessly, a winding two-lane ribbon cutting through the vast, uninhabited Montana landscape. Ashley Taylor had been driving for hours, the music on the radio long since replaced by the monotonous hum of her car's engine and the sound of tires on rough asphalt. Her fuel tank was just past half, but the temperature gauge was slowly creeping upwards, an ominous sign in the middle of this desolate wilderness. She had seen a few scattered small towns on the map, but so far, none had materialized. Mile marker 47 was the only indicator she had, clinging to a rusty metal post by the roadside as if pointing to an emptiness that promised nothing but more silence. The crisp mountain air was already starting to seep in through the slightly open window, and the afternoon sun was beginning to dip west, painting the sky in gradients of orange and purple. Her car's engine suddenly coughed, sputtering with a rough sound that made Ashley gasp. The check engine light flared bright red on the dashboard, and the steering felt heavy in her hands. The car lurched forward a few more feet, emitting a thin stream of smoke from the now radiating hood before finally dying completely on the gravel shoulder. The stillness that followed the engine's death was oppressive. Ashley tried to restart the car several times, turning the ignition key with dwindling hope, but there was only a dead click and then silence. A shiver ran down her spine. She was acutely aware of her isolation. No cell signal, no other cars in sight, just vast expanses of pine trees and rolling hills in the distance. Dusk was quickly approaching, bringing with it a chilling drop in temperature. The cold began to bite, and Ashley knew she couldn't just wait inside the car. She had to find help, or at least shelter. Grabbing a flashlight, a bottle of water, and a thick jacket from the back seat, she locked her car door with an odd feeling that she was leaving it for good. Walking along the deserted highway felt profoundly different. Every small sound of the surrounding forest was amplified. Every long tree shadow seemed like a lurking figure. She walked, her pace steady yet wary, for almost an hour. The sky had already darkened, the first stars beginning to twinkle above, and the biting cold was sinking deeper. Then, in the distance, through a gap in the dense pine trees, she saw it. A faint glow, as if from a window emitting a weak yellowish light. It was too far to identify, but it was a sign of life, or at least the vestiges of it. Taking a deep breath, Ashley veered off the main highway, following a barely visible dirt track that led towards the light. The dirt track led her deeper into the forest, and after several minutes, faint shapes began to appear. Old buildings, partially collapsed, stood like skeletons under the darkening sky. This was a ghost town. Broken windows stared blankly, faded store signs swayed gently in the whistling wind. Silver Creek read the faint inscription on a crooked old wooden sign at the town's entrance. A name that once promised prosperity, now just a whisper of a forgotten past. The air in the town felt heavy, thick with the smell of dust and decaying wood. There was a deeper silence here than on the highway, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Ashley walked slowly between the derelict buildings, her feet crunching on scattered gravel and glass shards. She saw the remnants of a general store, a saloon, even a small church with a collapsed bell tower. Each step felt like a trespass, disturbing the eternal rest of the dead town. The hope she had felt at seeing the light began to wane, replaced by a cold dread. Yet, amidst the debris and ruin, one strange sight caught her attention. At the far end of the town's main street, towering over the fallen buildings, stood an unusual two-story house. It had a dark gray paint job that still looked fresh, its windows clean and draped with neat white curtains. Its front lawn, though not perfect, appeared trimmed, and a few potted plants on the porch seemed to contain living flora. This was an utterly out-of-place sight. How could the only structure in this dead town be so meticulously maintained? Suspicion crept into her mind, but the cold and desperation were stronger. She needed help. She needed shelter. With a pounding heart, Ashley moved closer to the house, each step heavy with apprehension. The light she had seen from a distance emanated from the house's front window, casting a warm, inviting yellow glow. She climbed onto the wooden porch, which oddly did not creak at all, and raised her hand to knock on the solid, black-painted wooden door. Her first knock echoed loudly in the chilling silence, as if the entire town was listening. There was no answer. She knocked again, a little louder this time. After a moment that felt like an eternity, the door slowly opened, revealing an old man. He had neatly combed white hair, calm blue eyes, and a friendly smile that was strangely at odds with the gloomy surroundings. He wore a clean plaid shirt and work trousers. "Evening, miss," he said, his voice quiet and soft, a little raspy. "You seem lost." Ashley quickly explained her situation, about her car breaking down at mile marker 47, about having to walk, and her discovery of this ghost town and his peculiar house. The man listened patiently, nodding occasionally, showing not the slightest hint of surprise. "Ah, yes, that often happens out here," the man said, gesturing towards the darkened road. "That road can be deceiving. Come in, miss. You must be cold and hungry. I have hot soup and a bed for you. We can attend to your car in the morning." Relief washed over Ashley, so potent she almost cried. The man stepped back, inviting her inside. The interior of the house was as warm and comfortable as it looked from the outside. There was a brightly burning fireplace in the living room, a comfortable upholstered sofa, and bookshelves filled with old volumes. It smelled of wood smoke and something delicious cooking. "My name is Elias," the man said, closing the door softly behind them with a final sound. "And you, miss?" "Ashley," she replied, still slightly dazed by the drastic change from the cold and fear outside to the warmth and security within. "Ashley Taylor." Elias offered a steaming bowl of soup and homemade bread, which Ashley devoured with ravenous hunger. During the meal, Elias told her a little about Silver Creek, or at least his version of it. He said it was once a prosperous small mining town, but the mines closed decades ago and everyone left. He claimed, was the only one left, tending to the town, keeping its memory alive. He spoke with nostalgia, but there was something cold in his eyes, an unusual glint. Ashley tried to ask about a phone or a way to contact the outside world, but Elias just shook his head. "No signal out here, Miss Ashley, and the landlines have been disconnected for ages. We're quite isolated here. You'll be safe here. In the morning, I'll take a look at your car." Ashley, exhausted and disoriented, accepted his words. She was given a clean, comfortable bedroom upstairs, a bed with crisp white sheets and a thick comforter. After a soul-saving hot shower, Ashley collapsed into bed, falling into a deep sleep despite a lingering sense of unease in her stomach. The next morning, Ashley woke up feeling refreshed, but the anxiety about her car returned. She went downstairs to find Elias had already prepared breakfast, scrambled eggs and bacon. "Good morning, Miss Ashley." He greeted her with the same kind smile. "Let's eat, then I'll inspect your car." After breakfast, Elias retrieved an old toolbox and they walked back to the highway. Ashley explained in detail what had happened to her car. Elias carefully opened the hood, examining various components with a calm, expert gaze. After a few minutes, he closed the hood with a quiet sigh. "Ah, Miss Ashley," he said, shaking his head. "It's worse than I thought. The fuel pump is severely damaged, and it also seems there's a serious problem with the transmission. These parts, you won't find them anywhere around here, let alone in this town. Ashley's hope shattered into pieces. Then what? She asked, her voice filled with despair. How can I leave? Elias placed a reassuring hand on Ashley's shoulder. Don't worry, Miss Ashley. You can stay here for as long as you need. We have plenty of supplies. And I'm sure something will come along. We'll figure it out. After all, you can't leave with a non-functioning car, can you? The following days passed slowly. Elias remained unfailingly kind, always ready with hot meals and conversation. He showed Ashley his small garden behind the house where he grew vegetables. He told her about the town's history again and again, but always evaded questions about his family or why he chose to remain alone in this dead town. Ashley tried to find other ways to contact the outside world. She scoured every corner of the town, looking for a public phone or a signal. There was nothing. The town was like a bubble, completely cut off from civilization. The silence of the town began to feel heavy, no longer comforting, but suffocating. Every night, she heard strange sounds from outside. Low whispers carried on the wind, sounds like footsteps on the empty gravel streets. She asked Elias about it, and the old man simply offered a faint smile. It's just the town breathing, Miss Ashley, recalling the past, nothing to worry about. However, Ashley's unease grew with each passing day. Elias's kind smile began to seem like a mask, and his eyes sometimes held a glint that was too sharp, too knowing. She felt like she was being watched, not just by Elias, but by the town itself, by the trees that surrounded it. One evening, as they sat in the living room by the flickering fireplace, Elias broke the silence. Miss Ashley, he said, his voice more serious than usual, I must confess, I'm very glad you came to Silver Creek. Ashley felt a cold sensation creep down her spine. Oh? She asked, trying to sound neutral. Yes, Elias continued, staring into the dancing flames. The town needed a friend. It's been lonely for too long. A friend? Ashley repeated, confused. You mean you needed a friend? Elias slowly shook his head. Not me, Miss Ashley. The town. The entity that inhabits this place. That allows this house to stand. That keeps the memories. It needs new companions. Elias's face was now devoid of a smile. His calm blue eyes now seemed to stare blankly, yet also full of a profound cruelty. Look around, Miss Ashley. This town isn't truly dead, only sleeping, and now it awakens for you. Ashley felt her heart pound violently. What are you talking about, Elias? I am its gatekeeper, Elias replied calmly, as if explaining the simplest thing in the world. I ensure that lost travelers, those who are desperate and isolated, find their way here. Like you. You sabotaged my car? Ashley whispered, horror gripping her. Elias let out a dry chuckle that held no amusement. Oh no, Miss Ashley, you brought your own brokenness here. I merely ensured that you couldn't leave once you arrived. I merely ensured you saw this house as an offer, not a trap. He rose from his chair, walking slowly around Ashley. The air in the room suddenly felt cold, even though the fire still burned. The old townsfolk, they didn't truly leave. They merely joined Silver Creek, became part of the entity. Eternal existence, security, peace. You're insane, Ashley said, backing away. Elias paused, looking at Ashley with a gaze that was now utterly clear, sharp, and completely unfriendly. Insane? No, Miss Ashley. I am a servant, and now it's your turn. The entity has been waiting. It hungers for new companions. Ashley scrambled to her feet, seeking the door. Her brain screamed to escape. I have to go, she said, her voice trembling. Oh, you can go, Elias said, his smile returning, but this time it was a terrifying sneer. But not from Silver Creek. You can go outside into the town and join your predecessors, become part of the eternal silence. He reached out towards Ashley, his fingers thin and pallid. Come, Miss Ashley, become a part of Silver Creek. Become eternal. Be the companion the entity desires. You will forever be a part of this place. Forever. Ashley ran. She thought of nothing but escaping, opening the door, and bursting out into the dark night. But as she descended the porch, the sounds from the town returned, this time not whispers, but distinct murmurs, as if hundreds of voices called her name from the crumbling buildings. The air became mortally cold, and the shadows among the trees seemed to move. She felt Elias's hand seize her arm, a strong, cold grip. She screamed, but her scream felt swallowed by the collective murmur of the town. Her eyes widened, looking into the darkness beyond the house, into Silver Creek that was supposed to be dead. But the town wasn't dead. It was alive, and it wanted her to be one of them, forever. True terrifying tales from life in the Appalachian Mountains. In the fall of 2019, the mountains of eastern Kentucky seemed unusually quiet to longtime residents across the region. Some locals claimed the stillness felt wrong, though wildlife activity reportedly remained normal in state records from that season overall. Dispatch logs from nearby counties noted fewer emergency calls than usual during those early autumn weeks across the Appalachian region. Yet within months, 3 separate incidents would quietly draw investigators deep into the Appalachian Mountains in eastern Kentucky and Virginia. Each case involved ordinary people whose reasons for being there seemed straightforward at first glance to county deputies and reporters. The first was Daniel Harper, a 34-year-old wildlife photographer working near Asheville, North Carolina during late summer assignments. He had traveled into Pisgah National Forest to document black bear populations for a regional conservation magazine in 2019. His stated goal was to capture dusk feeding patterns reportedly changing according to archived notes from park biologists that year. Friends said he preferred isolated terrain because crowds disrupted animal behavior and complicated his long exposures in remote valleys there. He checked in with his editor every evening through a satellite phone, according to company policy, during that assignment period. On October 12, he radioed that he planned to hike toward a ridge above the French Broad River before sunset. Weather reports indicated mild temperatures and clear visibility across western North Carolina that afternoon, with no storms forecast nearby region. At 7 p.m., he sent a final message saying he had found promising tracks near camp beside a creek bed. When he failed to call the next morning, his editor contacted the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office for assistance immediately that day. Dispatch logs showed deputies reached his campsite by noon and found his vehicle parked undisturbed along a gravel service road. His camera equipment remained inside the tent, though his primary lens was reportedly missing from inventory that afternoon, per deputies. Search teams documented a single set of boot prints leading uphill toward dense laurel thickets above the river valley floor. Rain arrived overnight and reportedly erased most impressions before forensic specialists could photograph the ground thoroughly for analysis purposes there. Some locals claimed they heard a distant whistle echoing through the forest after midnight from somewhere beyond the ridgeline. Investigators never confirmed those accounts, and state records list the cause of disappearance as undetermined in that county file entry. Daniel Harper was declared legally dead in 2011 after extended review of the case by state authorities there. His family maintained that he would not have abandoned his equipment without explanation under normal working conditions in wilderness areas. County files from 2009 include interviews with hikers who reportedly saw smoke that night near his camp area. Those statements conflict with meteorological data showing minimal wind and no active campfires nearby during that specific time frame recorded there. Investigators wrote that terrain hazards, including sinkholes and sudden drop-offs, could not be ruled out as contributing factors officially. The second incident occurred in rural West Virginia near the town of Beckley during early winter 2015 season months. A 42-year-old nurse named Carla Jennings had rented a cabin outside city limits for a quiet retreat weekend. She reportedly sought solitude after a demanding schedule at Raleigh General Hospital, where she worked rotating night shifts regularly there. Her stated goal was rest and hiking along marked trails in the surrounding Monongahela foothills during that short vacation period. According to rental agreements, she planned to stay 3 nights before returning home to her apartment in Beckley proper area. On the second evening, neighbors reportedly noticed her porch light flickering well past midnight at the isolated cabin site there. Snow began falling around 1 a.m., according to National Weather Service archives, for that Raleigh County sector overnight period locally. The property owner said he attempted to plow the access road early next morning before sunrise on Sunday their morning. He found her car idling with the driver's door open and no footprints nearby in fresh accumulating snow outside it. Dispatch logs confirmed deputies arrived within 18 minutes and secured the cabin interior after receiving his urgent call for help. Inside, they documented a half-packed duffel bag and muddy water pooled near the hearth on hardwood floor boards there. State records indicate the cabin windows were locked from within and showed no damage during that inspection process, documented officially. Her cell phone lay on the kitchen table with a missed call from her sister, placed at 1:14:02 p.m. The phone records reportedly show no outgoing activity after 1:003 p.m. that night, according to county file review notes later. Despite extensive searches across Raleigh County, investigators never located Carla Jennings during the following weeks of winter operations there officially. Some locals claimed an abandoned mine shaft lay hidden somewhere beyond the tree line near that rental property boundary area there. Investigators acknowledged historical mining activity, yet never confirmed any open shafts nearby within documented survey maps of that zone officially. County survey maps from 2004 show several sealed entrances miles away from the cabin location, according records archived. Weather conditions reportedly erased potential tracks beyond the immediate driveway perimeter before tracking teams expanded their search radius outward further. Her case remains open in state databases with status listed as missing, endangered as of 2023 records publicly. The third account unfolded in eastern Tennessee near the city of Johnson City during late spring 2018 period season. Marcus Lee, a 29-year-old graduate student, was conducting field research in Cherokee National Forest for his thesis project. He studied salamander populations reportedly sensitive to subtle temperature changes in mountain streams during early summer breeding cycles there locally. University paperwork shows he obtained permits and filed itineraries with campus administrators before departing for the remote study area officially. His goal was to collect water samples at 3 designated sites along a tributary feeding the Nolichucky River basin there. On May 6, he emailed his advisor describing unusually warm readings at Site 2 within that forest corridor region nearby. He planned to revisit the upstream location before driving back to campus housing in Johnson City later that evening again. When he failed to return, classmates reported his absence to Washington County authorities the following morning around 9 a.m. there. Search crews located his parked truck near a locked Forest Service gate along a gravel access road spur there east. His sampling equipment remains secured in the bed beneath a weatherproof tarp tied down with nylon straps per inventory list. Footprints reportedly led from the truck toward a narrow trail descending into dense rhododendron thickets beside the stream bank there. Afternoon storms moved through the region, complicating aerial searches by state police helicopters during that initial response window period significantly. According to archive notes, volunteers heard what sounded like distant metallic clanging somewhere beyond the ridgeline that evening nearby. Investigators later determined an old cable bridge once crossed that section decades earlier, according to county infrastructure records reviewed then. Records conflict on whether any remnants of the structure remained in 2018 when he disappeared from that forest area. After 5 days, officials scaled back operations, citing dangerous terrain and limited leads within the Cherokee National Forest boundary zone. Marcus Lee was later listed as missing with presumed accidental death in reports filed by Washington County authorities officially afterward. His parents disputed that conclusion, pointing to his experience navigating rugged backcountry environments during previous research trips. They're often alone. University officials declined further comment, citing privacy policies and ongoing reviews related to that field research project documentation file internally. No conclusive evidence has surfaced to clarify the final movements of Marcus Lee within that Appalachian region case file officially. Though separated by years, the three incidents share geographic isolation within the Appalachian Mountains across multiple state jurisdictions there regionally. Each individual reportedly entered rugged terrain with clear professional or personal objectives documented in emails, permits, or rental agreements beforehand. Dispatch logs from different counties reveal prompt initial responses despite challenging landscapes and limited cellular coverage in those areas overall. Yet, environmental factors repeatedly obstructed searches and complicated efforts to preserve potential evidence within the mountainous forest terrain zones there. Investigators never publicly linked the cases, and officials described them as unrelated events occurring in separate Appalachian communities years apart. Some locals claimed patterns existed involving sudden weather shifts and unexplained sounds reported across various mountain counties there over years. State climatology records, however, show ordinary seasonal variations during each disappearance period, according to archived meteorological summaries reviewed later officially. Wildlife experts noted that black bears and coyotes frequent those forests without incident, affecting most experienced hikers there annually, normally. None of the three individuals reportedly carried firearms during their excursions into the Appalachian backcountry regions noted in files reviewed. County files from 2009 emphasized terrain hazards rather than criminal activity as primary working theories in reports drafted. In Daniel Harper's case, investigators mapped sinkholes scattered throughout Pisgah National Forest using geological surveys from state archives available publicly. Several depressions reportedly measured more than 15 feet deep and were concealed by brush and leaf litter there. Search coordinators acknowledged a fall could have resulted in injuries, preventing self-rescue within that remote drainage area there entirely. However, no equipment, fragments, or fabric were recovered from those mapped depressions during subsequent ground searches conducted later there officially. The absence of physical evidence continues to complicate definitive conclusions in his file maintained by Buncombe County authorities today still. In Carla Jennings's disappearance, deputies explored theories involving hypothermia and disorientation during sudden winter weather events in Raleigh County areas. Temperatures reportedly dropped to 18 degrees Fahrenheit before sunrise that morning, according to National Weather Service archived data logs available. Yet, investigators noted her heavy coat remained hanging inside the cabin, according to inventory photographs taken at scene there later. No signs of forced entry or struggle were documented in the official report filed by Raleigh County deputies that week. Her vehicle fuel gauge indicated nearly full capacity according to mechanic inspection notes entered into the county evidence system afterward. In Marcus Lee's situation, search teams analyzed water levels in the tributary using gauges maintained by Tennessee Valley Authority staff. Data reportedly showed slightly elevated flow, yet nothing considered extreme for that season within the Appalachian watershed region there overall. Investigators also examined the abandoned cable bridge theory raised by volunteers during follow-up interviews documented in archive notes later. County infrastructure records list the bridge as dismantled in 1998 following storm damage assessments that year locally conducted. Whether any cables remained hidden beneath vegetation was never confirmed by investigators during that search operation period in forest there. Across all three cases, search dogs reportedly tracked scents that eventually dissipated near water sources or rocky outcrops there nearby. Handlers documented abrupt losses of trail within short distances of personal items found at each respective search, location, site area. Some locals claimed these patterns suggested coordinated interference by unknown persons operating within remote Appalachian territories at night there sometimes. Law enforcement officials stated publicly that no evidence supported organized criminal involvement in any of the documented investigations reviewed internally. Records conflict regarding minor tips, yet none produced verifiable suspects, according to county summaries released years later publicly thereafterward. The Appalachian Mountains span multiple states, creating jurisdictional challenges for coordinated searches among rural county agencies with limited budgets available. Funding constraints reportedly limited the duration of helicopter deployments in each case, according to state budget documents reviewed later publicly. Volunteers filled gaps, yet rugged terrain slowed systematic grid coverage across steep hollows and densely wooded ridgelines there, significantly overall. Search coordinators reportedly prioritized high-probability zones based on last known locations provided in dispatch logs and witness statements collected. Despite those efforts, no substantial breakthroughs were recorded in official summaries issued by respective county sheriff offices, afterward publicly later. Media coverage at the time remained largely regional with limited national attention, according to archived newspaper articles from that period. Reporters cited scarce confirmed information and reliance on family statements when constructing early narratives about the disappearances they're publicly released. In subsequent years, online forums revisited the cases, often blending fact with speculation drawn from incomplete county documents posted publicly. Investigators never endorsed those discussions and rarely issued clarifying updates beyond brief statements, confirming cases remained open or inactive status. Families of the missing continued private searches, according to interviews archived by local stations in Appalachian communities nearby there afterward. Daniel Harper's editor reportedly revisited Pisgah National Forest several times after the disappearance, seeking closure and additional information there privately. He told reporters that the forest felt unchanged despite lingering uncertainties surrounding his former photographer colleague missing case there publicly. Carla Jennings' sister organized annual candlelight gatherings in Beckley to honor her memory and encourage tips from residents there locally. Attendance reportedly fluctuated as years passed without substantive developments in the official investigation files maintained by authorities there locally afterward. Marcus Lee's university established a small research grant in his name, supporting field safety training for graduate students there annually. University statements emphasize preparation and communication protocols for remote research conducted within Appalachian National Forest areas by students there annually. Officials reportedly cite his disappearance as motivation for improved tracking procedures, including satellite beacons and mandatory check-in schedules there. In West Virginia, rental agencies revised winter guidelines for isolated cabins after reviewing the Jennings case details from files internally. Owners now reportedly require guests to confirm safe arrival each evening through text messages or direct phone calls there nightly. These policy changes appear in updated contracts filed with county clerks across several Appalachian jurisdictions since 2019 there regionally. Despite procedural adjustments, the 3 disappearances remain unresolved in official archives maintained by agencies in North Carolina, West Virginia, Tennessee. State records categorize them under missing persons with limited explanatory detail beyond timelines and inventory lists compiled at scenes there. Investigators interviewed dozens of witnesses, yet none provided consistent final sightings across the separate Appalachian locations involved there. Overall, documented. Physical landscapes shifted, with seasons altering vegetation and water flow patterns across the mountain, hollows and ridges there annually, regionally. Over time, potential clues may have been obscured by natural processes within the Appalachian forest ecosystems surrounding sites there entirely. The Appalachian Mountains continue to attract hikers, researchers, and travelers each year seeking solitude work or recreation in remote terrain. Most return safely with photographs, data, and stories of quiet vistas shared with friends, families, and online communities afterward widely. For Daniel Harper, Carla Jennings, and Marcus Lee, the mountains marked their last confirmed locations recorded in dispatch logs there. What happened beyond those documented moments remains uncertain within official accounts preserved in state records and archive notes there today. Investigators continue to classify each file as open or inactive, pending new evidence submitted to the appropriate county authorities officially. Not human, not animal. What stalked the victims in the Redwood Dark? They called the woods the Redwood Dark, not because the giant trees blocked the sun, but because of the oppressive, ancient malevolence that seemed to swallow sound and light. This is the story of what happened to Ethan and Sarah Miller, two avid hikers who ventured into the deepest, most restricted part of Northern California's Humboldt County in the late 1990s. Searching for a legendary forgotten grove, they found something else entirely. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decay, the silence broken only by the occasional snap of a distant twig. It was the third night of their off-grid excursion. Ethan was adjusting his backpack, preparing for the final steep ascent, when Sarah nudged him, her eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rush of the nearby creek. It sounded like metal scraping. Ethan shook his head. "It's the wind, babe." Just the wind hitting the old fire tower structure far up the ridge. He tried to sound reassuring, but the sound, when it repeated a low, wet shh, was far too heavy and rhythmic to be wind. It sounded like something very large dragging itself over rough bark, or perhaps rock. They stood frozen, the massive redwoods towering hundreds of feet above them, turning the midday into twilight. Then the sound stopped, replaced by an unnerving, absolute silence. A silence that felt less like an absence of sound and more like sound being actively absorbed. Ethan quickly pulled out his hunting knife, gripping the handle until his knuckles turned white. "Okay, maybe it's a big cat. Let's pack up." Now, but before they could move, a new sound emerged, impossibly close. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was a single, wet, heavy breath emanating from just behind the enormous trunk standing 10 feet to their right. It was the sound of something inhaling moisture and earth, an inhalation so profound it felt like the very air was being vacuumed from their lungs. They didn't wait. They scrambled, abandoning their camp, running blindly up the steep incline, the terrifying realization sinking in. Whatever was back there, it wasn't human. And it certainly wasn't acting like any animal they had ever read about. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're a fan of the strange, the dark, and the mysterious, the kind of stories that make you question everything you thought you knew about the world, you're in the right place. Before we dive back into the horror of the Redwood Dark, please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss one of these deep dives into the unknown. Ethan and Sarah ran for nearly an hour, navigating the treacherous terrain, tripping over gnarled roots, their lungs burning. When they finally paused, hidden behind a cluster of granite boulders, the forest seemed calm again. Too calm. They checked their surroundings. There were no obvious signs of pursuit, no sounds of heavy footsteps. "It stopped," Sarah gasped, leaning against the cold rock. "Maybe we lost it." "We didn't lose it," Ethan corrected, his voice raspy. He was staring at the ground, about 15 feet away from their hiding spot. "It stopped following us because it's already ahead of us." In the soft, mossy earth were tracks. They were huge, nearly twice the size of a human footprint, but what chilled them was the shape. It was a clear, five-toed print, but the weight distribution was wrong. It appeared to have a massive, elongated heel, and the toes were tipped with razor-sharp points that dug deeply into the soil. And worse, running alongside the foot tracks were drag marks, not from a tail, but from something heavy being occasionally rested and then pulled, leaving a strange, wet residue. The tracks were heading deeper into the forest in the exact direction they were going. They decided they couldn't go back to the abandoned camp. Whatever that thing was, it was territorial. They had to keep moving toward the ranger station marked on their map, nearly 4 miles away. They began to navigate silently, stepping carefully around every loose branch. As the afternoon faded into the deep, cold twilight typical of the redwoods, the atmosphere became unbearably tense. They started noticing bizarre features of the landscape that hadn't been there before. Small piles of bones, not just animal bones, but fragments that looked strangely articulated, were placed meticulously at the base of certain trees. And then there were the carvings. High up on the smooth, reddish bark of the tallest redwoods, maybe 20 feet off the ground, were deep, spiraling gouges. These weren't the markings of a bear sharpening its claws. These were intricate, almost intelligent patterns, repeating the same strange, elongated X shape. How did something get up there to do that? Sarah whispered, pointing her flashlight beam upward, illuminating the grotesque symbols. Ethan had no answer. He could only stare at the impossibility of the marks, feeling the skin prickle on his arms. The forest wasn't just watching them, it was marked by this presence. They pushed on, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. By the time they reached the clearing where the abandoned ranger shack was supposed to be, the moon was hidden behind a thick canopy, and the world was ink black. The shack was worse than abandoned. It looked consumed by the forest. The porch was rotten, windows were broken, and the whole structure sagged like a defeated animal, but it offered shelter. Inside, the air was stale and heavy with dust and mildew. Ethan immediately barricaded the warped door with an old wooden dresser they found nearby. They pulled out the last of their meager supplies, a small bottle of water and a few energy bars. That's when the sounds began again. Not the breathing, not the scraping. This time, it was a sound of immense, coordinated force. It sounded like massive stones being hurled against the trees surrounding the shack, a slow, deliberate rhythm moving clockwise around their perimeter. It was a psychological attack, a way to notify them that they were surrounded and trapped. Sarah started to weep silently, muffling the sound with her sleeve. Ethan gripped his knife, staring out the tiny, dust-caked window. He saw nothing but impenetrable darkness and the fleeting, reflective gleam of dew on the moss. He couldn't see the entity, but he could feel the incredible power behind the impacts shaking the very foundation of the shack. Then, the banging stopped. The resulting silence was heavier than before. Ethan waited, heart pounding, listening for any shift in the air. That's when Sarah nudged him again, pointing a trembling finger toward the corner of the room near the old fireplace. "Ethan," she choked out, tears finally streaming down her face. "It's talking." Ethan strained his ears. He heard a low clicking sound, almost like a bird, but unnaturally wet. Then a voice, raspy and distorted, yet undeniably familiar, echoed from the chimney flue. Sarahethan. It was trying to mimic human speech, but the sounds were strained, mechanical, like a damaged recording playing back. And it knew their names. It had been listening to their conversations around the campfire for days. As the creature outside began scratching violently at the wood of the door, a high-pitched, terrifying shriek of splintering timber, Ethan realized they were out of time. He kicked the dresser aside, grabbed Sarah's arm, and smashed out the back window. They tumbled outside into the cold, dense dark, narrowly avoiding the long, spindly arm that tore through the front door where they had just been. They ran for the small creek nearby, hoping the water would mask their scent. As they splashed across the icy stream, Ethan risked a look back. Standing in the doorway of the ruined shack, illuminated for just a split second by the weak beam of his headlamp before he dropped it, was the entity. It was tall, easily 7 feet, but impossibly thin, almost skeletal. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent at bizarre angles, suggesting it could move equally well on 2 or 4 appendages. Its skin was pale and slick, glistening with the creek moisture, merging seamlessly with the rough bark of the trees. But the face was the horror. It had no obvious eyes or mouth, only a deep, wet fissure running down the center of its skull, and 2 massive, reflective yellow discs set too low on its forehead. It looked like a mockery of humanity, perfected for stalking in the dark. They ran until they collapsed near the outskirts of the restricted zone, eventually found by a forestry patrol the next morning, dehydrated and traumatized. The forestry officials were dismissive, attributing the attack to a rogue bear or a mountain lion driven mad by hunger. But Ethan and Sarah knew better. They returned to the area months later, obsessed with finding an explanation for what they had seen and heard. They managed to sneak back into the dilapidated ranger shack. This time, Ethan focused on the old wooden desk that sat beneath the broken window. Tucked deep within a sealed drawer, he found a collection of brittle, leather-bound journals dating back to 1982. The entries weren't standard forestry logs. They were the paranoid ravings of a former ranger, Samuel Jenkins, detailing his descent into fear over the course of 3 years. Jenkins wrote about the listener, a presence that haunted the deep woods, not preying on animals, but on human solitude and sound. He wrote about the strange X carvings high on the trees, noting they only appeared after someone had been missing in the area. But the most chilling entry was near the end, dated October 1984. They said the military abandoned the old biotech testing grounds 15 miles west of here in '75. Lies. They didn't abandon it, they just stopped reporting the results. The listener isn't natural, it's an adjustment, an adaptation. A human who has been remade to survive the absolute dark and the deep cold. I heard it today, trying to replicate the sounds of the radio. It's getting smarter, it knows my routine. It's not just listening anymore, it's recording. Jenkins's final entry was just a single word, scribbled violently across the page, stained with dried reddish material. The horrifying plot twist was revealed. The entity wasn't a biological creature evolving naturally. It was a failed experiment, a human, engineered or twisted by isolation, designed to mimic and camouflage, driven mad by the environment, and now utilizing vocal mimicry to draw in its prey. The scraping they heard wasn't just dragging, it was the sound of its elongated talons constantly honing themselves against the rock and bark. And it knew their names because it listened, silently recording their conversations, waiting for the perfect moment to play back their voices against them. Ethan and Sarah fled the redwoods forever, haunted not by the specter of a monster, but by the knowledge that something intensely human, yet completely unnatural, was still lurking in the deep darkness, patiently waiting and listening. What do you think about this story? Let us know in the comments below. Let's move on to the next story. I took the night shift at an abandoned hotel I shouldn't have. In late October of 2019, a night clerk accepted a temporary job inside a shuttered coastal hotel. He believed the assignment would be routine security coverage, nothing more than paperwork and silence. By the end of his third shift, dispatch logs would record calls that investigators never fully explained. The clerk was Daniel Harper, 29, a recently laid-off front desk supervisor trying to stabilize his finances. He had worked hospitality jobs across Monterey County, California, and needed steady income before winter arrived. The property owner reportedly hired him to monitor the building overnight during pending renovation negotiations. State records describe the hotel as inactive but structurally sound, though county file from 2009 noted prior safety complaints. Daniel told friends he expected boredom, not complications, because the building had been closed since 2011. He drove down Highway 1 each evening with coffee and a flashlight, planning to document any trespassers for insurance compliance. His goal was simple: complete 12 overnight shifts without incident and secure a reference from the property management company. The hotel stood on the northern edge of Monterey, overlooking a stretch of dark shoreline rarely visited after dusk. Its windows were boarded at ground level, while upper floors remained exposed behind dusty glass panes. Some locals claimed the building attracted drifters, though police activity reports showed only minor trespassing citations. Daniel received a single master key, a two-way radio connected to a private security contractor, and printed emergency procedures. Dispatch logs instructed him to conduct hourly walkthroughs across 3 accessible floors and document irregularities in a spiral notebook. The electricity functioned only in limited circuits, leaving corridors dim and unevenly lit by aging fluorescent fixtures. Archived notes from the management office mentioned intermittent plumbing noises, which investigators later attributed to corroded pipes. On his first night, Daniel arrived at 10 p.m. and locked the front entrance behind him. He performed a methodical sweep of the lobby, restaurant area, and conference rooms without encountering movement or damage. The silence felt heavy but predictable, similar to other vacant properties he had supervised during previous employment. At 11 p.m., he radioed the security contractor, confirming no visible signs of entry or structural concerns. According to dispatch logs, the call lasted under 30 seconds and contained no irregular remarks. Daniel settled behind the front desk with a thermos, reviewing renovation proposals left inside a labeled folder. Nothing in the state records suggested the building posed immediate hazards beyond outdated wiring and deferred maintenance. The second night introduced the first anomaly, though investigators never confirmed its source. Around 1 a.m., Daniel reported hearing footsteps above the third-floor ballroom, an area officially sealed. He paused at the stairwell and listened carefully, counting what he described as measured pacing. Dispatch logs show he requested clarification about authorized contractors, but none were scheduled that week. The security contractor advised him to complete a perimeter check outside before escalating to local police. Daniel complied and found no forced doors or broken windows, only ocean wind pressing against warped siding. Some locals claimed surfers occasionally sheltered near the property, though officers later found no evidence supporting that possibility. By the third shift, Daniel appeared fatigued. According to archived notes he left inside the lobby binder. He wrote that sleep had become inconsistent due to anxiety about unexplained sounds and shadows. At approximately 1:47 a.m., he contacted dispatch again, stating that a light flickered in a hallway previously dark. State records confirm partial power restoration tests occurred weeks earlier, yet investigators never confirmed active circuits that night. Daniel reportedly walked toward the hallway with his flashlight raised and radio clipped near his collar. He described a door at the end of the corridor standing open, though maintenance logs indicated it should have been locked. When he pushed the door wider, he found only an empty storage room with peeling wallpaper and damp carpeting. The following evening, Daniel invited his friend, Marcus Lee, 32, a freelance photographer documenting abandoned architecture. Marcus intended to capture interior images for a personal portfolio, believing the structure held historical value. Daniel received informal permission from the property owner, according to archived email correspondence later reviewed by investigators. The two men entered at 9:45 p.m. and began photographing the grand staircase and former dining hall. Marcus reportedly commented on unusual cold drafts near the elevator shaft, though environmental reports cited broken window seals. Dispatch logs confirm Daniel checked in as required at 11 p.m. and reported no safety concerns. They separated briefly so Marcus could set up long exposure shots on the third-floor mezzanine. At 1:18 a.m., Marcus called down from the mezzanine, asking Daniel whether another person was walking behind him. Daniel responded that he remained alone near the lobby and had not moved upstairs. According to Marcus, he heard slow footsteps crossing the balcony and stopping near the railing. Investigators later reviewed his photographs and found several frames blurred by sudden camera movement. State records show no additional keycards issued during that period, though the building lacked modern access controls. Daniel hurried upstairs and found Marcus pale but steady, pointing toward a darkened corridor. Both men searched the area and discovered no intruders, yet they agreed to remain together afterward. Shortly after 1 a.m., the building's fire alarm activated without visible smoke or heat signatures. Dispatch logs captured Daniel's strained voice as he reported the alarm panel flashing multiple zone errors. The local fire department arrived within minutes and conducted a full sweep of accessible floors. Their official report listed the incident as a malfunction caused by outdated wiring, though investigators never confirmed the exact trigger. Firefighters noted no signs of trespassing, forced entry, or hidden occupants during their inspection. Marcus reportedly told an officer about the footsteps, but the statement was not included in the primary report. By 2:30 a.m., the alarm was silenced and authorities cleared the scene, leaving Daniel to complete the shift alone. 2 nights later, Daniel resumed work without Marcus, determined to finish his contract despite growing unease. He confided to a coworker that quitting would jeopardize future employment references during an already difficult job market. At 1:05 a.m., he logged a routine patrol of the third floor and documented nothing unusual. Around 1:40 a.m., dispatch logs record heavy breathing before Daniel stated someone was inside the sealed ballroom. He claimed he heard chairs scraping across the floor, though renovation plans showed most furniture had been removed years earlier. Investigators later reviewed security contractor call recordings, noting background sounds resembling distant thuds. Some locals claimed the ocean waves could echo through ventilation shafts, but investigators never confirmed that explanation. Police officers from Monterey responded at 1:02 a.m. and searched the ballroom with flashlights drawn. Their report stated the room was empty except for stacked tables and construction debris. Daniel insisted he heard movement moments before officers arrived, yet no footprints appeared in the dust. State records show officers recommended terminating overnight staffing until renovations officially commenced. The property owner reportedly declined, citing insurance requirements and budget limitations. Daniel completed that shift without further incident, though coworkers later described him as visibly shaken. Archived notes from the security contractor indicated concern about liability exposure if unexplained disturbances continued. On November 14 of 2019, Daniel failed to check in at his scheduled 11 p.m. radio call. Dispatch attempted contact for 7 known minutes before alerting local authorities. Officers arrived to find the front entrance locked from inside, with Daniel's car parked in the lot. Inside the lobby, they discovered his flashlight and radio resting on the front desk. According to the official report, there were no signs of struggle or forced exit. A search of the building and surrounding shoreline continued through early morning with negative results. County file from 2009 resurfaced during the investigation, referencing prior safety concerns but no violent incidents. Daniel Harper was listed as a missing person, and investigators never confirmed what occurred inside the hotel that night. In the months that followed, renovation plans were quietly suspended and the property remained vacant. Some locals claimed they still noticed lights flickering in upper windows after midnight. Dispatch logs from subsequent patrols documented no further alarms or emergency calls. State records classified the case as open but inactive, pending new evidence or credible sightings. Marcus Lee reportedly stopped photographing abandoned structures and declined further interviews with local media. The hotel continues to overlook the Monterey shoreline, silent and officially unoccupied. Investigators never confirmed whether Daniel encountered another person inside or whether conflicting data obscured a simpler explanation. He heard footsteps upstairs. He lives alone. To the 20th of November 2018, 8:37 p.m. Mark Hernandez had always considered the old house in Blythe, California, a peaceful retreat. Its thick walls and isolation from distant neighbors were among the reasons he purchased it. The quiet was something he cherished, a stark contrast to the city life he had left behind. The silent nights were often filled only by the chirping of crickets outside and the occasional whisper of wind through a window crack. Mark was a practical man, so when he first heard a faint creak upstairs, he dismissed it. Old house, settling wood, he thought. It was a common occurrence. A few days later, the sounds returned. This time they were clearer, like slow, measured footsteps. Mark was reading in the downstairs living room when he heard them. One step, then silence, then 2 more steps. He sharpened his hearing. It wasn't the random creaking of a shifting house, this was more of a pattern. He checked on his cat, Mittens, who was fast asleep on the sofa beside him. It wasn't her. Mark briefly considered it might be a neighbor, sounds traveling somehow, but his house stood alone on a large plot of land. He was the only one there. He tried to reassure himself that it was just the sounds of an old house, perhaps the pipes working or wind getting in through a faulty attic vent. He went upstairs, turned on the lights, and checked every room. The master bedroom, the bathroom, and the guest room were all empty, exactly as he had left them. No open windows, no signs of disturbance. He even opened closets and looked under beds. Nothing. It made him feel a little foolish, himself spooked by noises in his own home. The sounds continued. They began to surface at unexpected times, often when he was engrossed in his work or just about to fall asleep. The footsteps were never heavy or hurried, always soft, deliberate, as if whatever or whoever was there did not wish to be detected. Over time, however, they began to change. It was no longer just footsteps. Now there was a faint dragging sound, a rustle like something being pulled across the wooden floor, and occasionally a soft brushing like fabric against a wooden surface. Mark started noticing small things. He had once left his car keys on the kitchen counter, but later found them hanging on the hook by the front door, a more logical place. One morning, he left a coffee mug on his bedside table, and when he returned in the afternoon, it was washed clean and placed in the dish rack. He initially assumed he had done it himself out of habit or forgetfulness. His memory could sometimes be a bit hazy. However, this was happening too often. One particular instance, he had left a stack of old letters he needed to sort on the dining room table. The next evening, the stack was gone. He searched for them, only to find them in his office, on his desk, meticulously organized into 3 piles by date. He never sorted his letters like that. A chill ran down his spine. He started feeling a slight paranoia. Was he sleepwalking? Did someone else have a spare key? But he had never given a spare key to anyone. This sensation began to evolve into something more than mere confusion. There was an odd feeling, a mixture of unease and, strangely, a slight relief. As if someone was quietly taking care of small things around his house, someone who paid attention to details he overlooked. He could almost mistake this for help, perhaps a benevolent presence looking after his home, but it was also profoundly wrong. No one was supposed to be there, and the things being moved were not just generic items. He began finding his personal belongings moved and rearranged in highly peculiar ways. His collection of old books on the bookshelf was reordered by the color of their covers, something Mark never did. The clothes in his closet were folded with precise creases, neater than he had ever folded them, and organized by fabric type. This wasn't just tidying up. This was an obsessive rearrangement, indicating an unsettling level of attention to detail. One evening, he brushed his teeth and left his toothbrush in the glass by the sink. The next morning, it wasn't there. He found it on the corner of the sink, laid out with its handle facing the mirror, bristles pointing directly at him. It was a small thing, but it made him feel as though he was being watched, that his every move was analyzed. This was not a coincidence. This was a message, or at least it felt like one. He started confiding in his friend, Jessica Rodriguez, over the phone. Jessica, a pragmatic woman, tried to reassure him. "Maybe you're just tired, Mark," she said. "Or perhaps you've just started to be more organized without realizing it. Sometimes we do things subconsciously." Mark tried to believe her, but he knew deep down that this wasn't him. This was something else. He began setting small traps. He placed a single strand of hair across the threshold of the guest room. He left a pen at the edge of his bedside table, slightly overhanging. He put a book on the shelf with its spine facing inward. Each time, his traps would be tripped. The hair was gone, the pen was back in the center of the table. The book was turned back with its spine facing outward. Someone or something was entering his rooms, and it was happening when he was asleep or away from the house. A cold dread began to grip him. The footsteps upstairs were no longer the sounds of an old house. They were the sounds of a moving entity, and they became more frequent. Sometimes, Mark could swear he heard a very faint breathing sound or an almost imperceptible rustle of fabric, as if something was watching him from upstairs, waiting for him to fall asleep or leave. He started noticing that the items being moved had a pattern. Books he had read about local history, about Blythe and its legends, were now all gathered on his bedside table, despite having been scattered across several rooms. His oldest, most worn clothes, the ones he typically used for yard work, were always found neatly folded at the top of his laundry pile. It was as if the entity was studying him, gathering information about his preferences, his routines. One night, he was woken by a faint clinking sound from upstairs. It was a different sound, more metallic. He lay still in bed, his heart pounding in his chest. After several minutes of silence, he forced himself to get up. He flicked on the light in the stairwell and slowly ascended. He headed towards the bathroom where the sound had originated. The light was off. He turned it on. Beside the sink, on a small counter, lay his collection of old keys. These were keys he had long kept in a hidden drawer in his office desk. Keys to his old apartment, broken padlocks, keys he himself had long forgotten the purpose of. But now they were arranged with precision, from smallest to largest, forming a perfect circle on the surface. In the center of that circle stood his toothbrush, upright. The air felt cold, even though the windows were closed. Mark felt sick to his stomach. It wasn't just a breach of privacy, it was a claim. This entity wasn't just in his house, it was claiming his house, and perhaps claiming Mark himself. He felt exposed. All his secrets, all his habits, everything he considered private had been scrutinized and analyzed. The quiet that was once peaceful now felt deadly, laden with an unseen threat. He could never truly sleep in that house again. Every creaking step, every faint rustle, every misplaced item became a constant reminder that he was not alone. He had become an occupant in his own home, a specimen under careful observation, and whatever was upstairs, it knew him better than he knew himself, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The thing that followed them out of the Appalachian woodses. In late October 2019, 3 experienced hikers entered the Appalachian woods outside Asheville, North Carolina. They expected cold rain, difficult terrain, and spotty reception. They did not expect the final call recorded in county dispatch logs that night. Investigators would later describe the recording as incomplete and deeply confusing. Ethan Cole was 34 years old, a freelance photographer documenting remote trails for an outdoor magazine. Marissa Grant, 29, worked as a graduate researcher studying fungal growth in high-elevation forests. Daniel Reeves, 41, was a former park ranger who reportedly joined the trip to advise on safety. According to archive notes, they planned a 2-day loop through a lesser-used section of Pisgah National Forest. State records show they checked weather forecasts predicting mild snowfall at higher elevations. None of them expressed concern in text messages recovered from their phones. Marissa wrote that the quiet sections of forest were ideal for sampling untouched soil. Ethan reportedly wanted sunrise photographs from a ridge known for fog inversion. Daniel told a friend he felt comfortable navigating the region despite recent trail closures. They parked at a public access lot near a trailhead outside Asheville. Surveillance footage from a nearby service station captured them buying water and batteries. The clerk later told investigators they seemed relaxed and joking about cold hands. Dispatch logs confirmed they signed a voluntary trail registry before heading north. Their estimated return time was listed as Sunday evening before sunset. The first day unfolded without any documented problems, according to phone metadata. Photos recovered from Ethan's camera showed dense hardwood forests and low clouds. Marissa recorded audio notes describing unusual fungal clusters near fallen hemlocks. Daniel texted his sister that the trail was muddier than expected but manageable. Nothing in those early records suggests fear or immediate danger. Late that afternoon, the temperature dropped faster than predicted by regional forecasts. Wind speeds reportedly increased along the ridgeline where they planned to camp. Ethan captured several images of tree lines bending in the gusts. Some locals later claimed sudden weather shifts were common in that corridor. Investigators never confirmed whether conditions alone could explain what followed. According to a county file from 2009, a similar ridge had been temporarily closed after unexplained livestock deaths nearby. Those incidents were attributed to predators, though records conflict on the specific species involved. Daniel was aware of the file and reportedly dismissed it as outdated rumor. Marissa noted in an archived voice memo that she heard distant knocking sounds at dusk. Ethan's final daylight photograph shows the tree line fading into heavy mist. They set camp in a shallow clearing surrounded by thick undergrowth and uneven stone. Phone GPS data indicates they were slightly off the marked trail. Daniel reportedly adjusted their route to avoid a washed-out bridge.